Inside the palace, everything was quiet. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the soft smell of flowers filled the air. Servants walked silently down the long halls, carrying trays of tea or folding fine silk. It was a beautiful place, but also full of secrets. Seo-won was a young girl who worked in the palace. Before, she had lived in a small house with her father, who taught her about herbs and medicine. But now, after being sold into the palace, she lived a very different life. She didn't try to make friends or stand out. She just did her work, quietly, and tried not to be noticed. But someone noticed her. His name was Ji-hwan. He was a high official in the palace, very handsome, very powerful, and always calm. People whispered about him all the time. Many feared him, some admired him. But no one really knew what he was thinking. Except, maybe, Seo-won. He first came to her when someone in the palace was sick. He asked for her help, and she gave it. She was calm, clever, and didn't act nervous around him. She didn't stare at his face or try to impress him, and that made him curious about her. He started coming back, sometimes to ask about herbs, sometimes just to talk. He would watch her hands as she worked, watch the way she stayed focused and quiet. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She didn't try to get close, but still, she stayed in his thoughts. Soon, he began leaving her small gifts, a special flower, a rare book, a bottle of calming oil. He never explained why. She didn't return them or speak of them, but she kept them. One evening, when the sun had set and the lanterns were glowing softly along the halls, Ji-hwan came, to her again. He looked different this time. Softer. Less like a powerful man, and more like someone who wasn't sure what to say. He told her that he enjoyed their time together, that her quiet way of speaking stayed in his mind, even after she was gone. She looked away, unsure what to say. He stepped closer, gently, and he told her that this was not about court business. He just wanted to be near her. She didn't answer, but her silence said more than words. After that night, something changed. They started to understand each other without speaking much. He would find reasons to see her. She began to wait for him, though she never said it out loud. When he brought her new herbs, she would spend extra time preparing them. Sometimes she would catch herself smiling after one of his visits. Then one day, it rained. A soft, peaceful rain that lasted all afternoon. Seo-won was in her room, grinding herbs into powder, when the door opened. Ji-hwan stepped inside, his robe slightly wet, drops of rain in his hair. She looked up in surprise. "I forgot my umbrella," he said with a soft smile. She raised one eyebrow. "How convenient," she said quietly. He stepped closer. His voice was even softer now. "Or maybe I just needed an excuse to see you." Seo-won didn't know what to say. Her heart felt warm, but her face stayed calm. She looked at him, and he looked back at her, not as a servant, not as someone below him, but as someone he truly cared for. And in the quiet sound of the rain, they stayed like that. No more words, just the feeling that something beautiful had begun. After that rainy afternoon, something changed between Seo-won and Ji-hwan. They still didn't speak much. Their meetings still seemed like coincidences, or simple tasks shared between two people. But the air between them felt different now. It was no longer just silence. It was something fuller, something warm, quiet, and waiting. Ji-hwan's eyes lingered a little longer on hers. And when she spoke, even if only a few words, he listened closely, like each word meant more than it seemed. Sometimes he didn't say anything at all, just watched her with calm, soft eyes. That look made Seo-won's heart beat a little faster, though she didn't show it. One morning, Seo-won was called to care for a court lady who had fallen ill. She gathered her herbs and powders and walked into the woman's room without a word. Ji-hwan was already there. He sat near the window, the sunlight touching his shoulder. When he saw Seo-won, his expression changed, just for a second. A small spark in his eyes, quickly hidden behind his usual calm face. He didn't speak much during the visit. He simply stayed until the lady fell asleep. As Seo-won walked out, into the hall he followed quietly. Then with a voice like a gentle wind, he said, "You care for others with such quiet kindness, but who cares for you?" Seo-won didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked her that before. She just looked at him. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. He saw her, truly saw her. In the days that followed, he began to appear more often, not in obvious ways. Sometimes she would find a small bowl of warm tea left by her door. Other times, a folded cloth laid neatly near her pillow to keep her warm during cold mornings. These were small gestures, simple things, but each one held care. She began to notice things about him too. How his fingers moved gently when he touched scrolls, how he spoke to the palace workers. Never with anger, always with calm respect. How he often stayed quiet for long moments, as if the world outside was too loud for the thoughts inside his heart. They didn't hold hands. They didn't speak of feelings. But somehow, Seo-won felt it. He was waiting for her, not in a hurry, not trying to claim her, just waiting. Like someone watching a flower slowly bloom in the warmth of spring. One quiet afternoon, Seo-won walked through the palace garden. The trees were beginning to blossom. Soft pink petals trembled in the breeze. She paused, closing her eyes, letting the wind touch her face. Then she saw him. Ji-hwan stood across the stone bridge, under a tree that hadn't bloomed yet. He didn't call out. He didn't walk forward. He simply watched her, as if he had been waiting for her all along. She turned to face him, slowly. The sound of leaves moving in the wind was the only sound between them. Then, after a long moment, he began to walk toward her. Each step was soft, unhurried. When he stood beside her, he didn't speak. He didn't ask how she felt or what she thought. He just stood there, and in that silence, everything made sense. There was no need for fast words or big promises. Just presence, just the soft knowing that she was no longer alone. And as the breeze moved gently through the trees, Seo-won felt something bloom quietly in her heart. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it. The kind of feeling that grows day by day, without rush, without noise. And when she looked at him, she could feel it. He saw only her, and that was enough. Time passed slowly in the palace. The days were filled with the same gentle routines, tea being served, scrolls being copied, footsteps moving like whispers down long corridors. But for Seo-won and Ji-hwan, even the smallest moments had begun to feel different. When she walked into a room and found him already there, something inside her chest lifted. When he left, she noticed the quiet he took with him. They still did not speak of feelings. They didn't need to. Every glance, every soft exchange, spoke more than words ever could. But others began to notice. Servants would pause when they passed each other in the hallway. Some court ladies whispered behind their fans. Not cruel words, just quiet questions. Have you seen the way he looks at her? She's only a servant, but she's different. Seo-won tried not to listen. She tried to keep her head low, her eyes down. But sometimes, she felt those whispers like a soft wind on the back of her neck. She feared what they might bring. One afternoon, as she walked through the medicine garden, she heard quiet footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Ji-hwan. He carried a small wooden box in his hands. Without a word, he held it out to her. Inside were dried petals of a very rare flower, one she had once spoken of when they first met. She looked up at him, surprised. "How did you find these?" she asked. He gave a small smile. "I remembered." Her hands trembled slightly as she took the box. No one had ever remembered such a small thing about her before. She bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." He stepped closer, not touching her, just near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You don't have to hide from them," he said gently. "I see you, and that is enough." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the feeling settle in her chest like a warm light. That evening, she placed the flower petals near her bed, beside the quiet scrolls and jars she kept hidden from view. They were not gifts of gold or jewels, but to her, they were more precious. In the days that followed, Ji-hwan began to walk with her more often, always in quiet places, always when no one else was near. He spoke of the stars, the wind, the scent of summer in the air. She listened, and sometimes she answered. Sometimes she said nothing at all, and when he looked at her, really looked, it was not with longing or hunger or pride. It was with stillness, like she was something peaceful in a world that had forgotten how to be quiet. One night, as the sky turned soft with the colors of dusk, Seo-won sat alone near the edge of the garden wall. She had just finished preparing herbs for the morning, and her hands were tired. She looked up at the sky and wondered, what was this feeling? She didn't need his promises. She didn't want a grand love story, not like the ones told by court poets. All she wanted was this: his presence, his kindness, the quiet space between them that felt like home. Then she heard his voice behind her, soft, almost a whisper. "May I sit with you?" She didn't turn. She just nodded. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. And for a long time they said nothing, just the sound of wind through the trees, the soft hum of the night. Two hearts, not touching, but close, so close. The palace was still, but not calm. A strange tension had begun to move through the halls, light as mist yet impossible to ignore. Rumors floated like dust in the sunlight. Someone had made a mistake in the outer court. A scroll had gone missing. Fingers were being pointed in every direction. Seo-won kept to her work, her head low, her steps quiet. But then, one afternoon, A guard came for her. She was taken to the inner chamber of a noble lady, a woman known for her pride and cold eyes. The woman had fallen ill, and someone had whispered that Seo-won might have made the wrong tea, that she may have added something extra. Of course she hadn't. But truth and gossip are not the same in the palace. Seo-won stood before the lady, calm but pale, her voice steady. "I only prepared what was ordered." The noble woman's lips curled. "Then let the court decide." Outside, the sky darkened with clouds. A storm was near. Guards began to whisper. A formal investigation would begin in the morning. If they found any sign of wrongdoing, Seo-won could be punished. Quietly, without fuss. That evening, she returned to her small room. Her hands shook as she tried to grind herbs, not from fear, but from a strange sadness. She had survived worse before, but now, there was someone who might worry, and that made it harder. Then, a soft knock at the door. She opened it slowly, and there he was, Ji-hwan. His face was calm, but his eyes, never before had they looked like this. A storm behind them, quiet, fierce. "I heard what happened," he said. Seo-won nodded. "It will pass." "No," he said softly. "It won't. Not unless someone stops it." She stepped back, unsure. "If you speak for me, they'll turn against you." He stepped forward, his voice even softer now. "Let them." She looked at him, truly looked, and saw not just a man of rank and beauty, but someone who was choosing her, willingly, publicly. "I'm not worth that risk," she whispered. He shook his head. "You are worth far more than that." Then he reached into his robe and placed something in her hand, his personal seal, a symbol of his name, his protection. "If they come for you," he said, "you show them this." Her fingers closed, around it, slowly. The metal warm from his touch. She felt her throat tighten, her heart swelling in her chest. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. He didn't smile. He only spoke the truth. "Because I cannot stand the thought of this palace without you in it." The wind outside began to rise, shaking the paper walls. But in the room, everything was still. He reached out then, slowly, gently, and placed his hand over hers. Not a kiss, not a confession, just touch. And in that moment, everything inside her heart said yes. Yes, she would trust him. Yes, he had already become something more than just a quiet presence. Yes, this was love, unspoken. Yes, but true. The morning came, gray and cool. The sky was heavy with clouds, and the palace moved more slowly than usual, as if even the wind was waiting to see what would happen. Seo-won walked quietly to the court chamber, holding the seal Ji-hwan had given. Her. Her heart beat fast, but her steps were calm. She had walked through fear before, but this time, she was not walking alone. Not really. She held his promise in her hand, and in her heart, she carried his words. When she entered, the room fell silent. The noble lady sat tall, her face sharp. She expected Seo-won to be afraid, to beg, But Seo-won did neither. She bowed respectfully, then placed the seal on the table. Gasps filled the air. The seal of Ji-hwan, the one only he carried. The court lady's face changed. Anger faded into caution. The room no longer belonged to her. Later that day, after the matter was reviewed, Seo-won was quietly cleared. No punishment, no blame, only silence. But that silence said everything. Ji-hwan had spoken for her, without words, but with his name. The Gi court began to whisper again, not with scorn, not with laughter, but with curiosity, and perhaps a little awe. Seo-won returned to her work as before. Her hands were steady again. But inside, something new had taken root. A soft warmth that stayed with her like sunlight on skin. And then, as the sun began to set that evening, she heard his steps. She turned before he even knocked. Ji-hwan stood, there, as he always did. Calm, quiet, beautiful. But this time his gaze was different. No more hiding, no more distance. "May I walk with you?" he asked. She nodded. They walked through the garden slowly, side by side, without speaking at first. The flowers had begun to open, small and delicate, releasing a soft scent into the evening air. She looked up at him. "You risked a great deal," she said gently. He didn't look away. "I would risk more." They stopped near the plum tree, the same place they had stood once before, and there, under the soft light of lanterns and the quiet watch of stars, she finally spoke the words that had waited for so long. "I was afraid," she whispered, "not of the court, not of the danger, but of caring for someone who could never truly be mine." He stepped closer, slowly. "You are not mine," he said. "You are yours. But if you will have me, I will stand beside you. Quietly. Always." She looked into his eyes and saw no doubt, no pride, no promise of a perfect life, only love. True, gentle, steady. She reached up very slowly and touched his sleeve. Just that. But it was enough. His hand found hers, and this time, he didn't let go. And they stood there, together in the quiet garden, no longer hiding from the world or from each other. The wind moved gently through the blossoms, and love, real and soft, bloomed quietly between them.